easy. About time. Hi, I'm Duru Moko. Apeatse. Hey. Hey.
Asan we what you were.
Hey.
What you say we do ever. What's I done here say? Just
Hey. 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 Kuna say, asaka kwano. Asaka kwano ina say. Serious. Hey. Ha. Hey.
You can't sing to Hana.
Minimum.
Wow.
Ha.
I'm the kind of what you have. Hana Nessie. Kano, it is a Hana Nessie. You don't blast it now.
Serious.
My friend, I pass one. As a massive disaster.
Hey. Ha.
I get where you know. My friend, I
say. Hi. Serious, the beast. Hey. What's it? What's that? Serious. Hey, serious. The whole Apeatse. Serious. The whole Apeatse. Disaster. The whole Apeatse. Hi. Oh, Nipa shall see how busy them. The whole town. No, so no sound. The whole town, we've been seeing that. And from maybe I've found Nipa home machine. I'm on shut down the moon. I Hello guys, welcome to Share PGH Online. My name is Sel and you're also welcome to our YouTube channel. If you're new to the channel, kindly subscribe SharePGH Online is a dedicated platform where we provide media influence to health and safety in Ghana. This is a platform where safety professionals engage with the outside community and share their opinion from the safety lens. This is a platform also where we actually consolidate health and safety news. We put them under various categories to provide a one-stop shop for health and safety news under workplace safety, public health, road transport safety, OHS legislation, safety culture, a day in life of a safety pro, and opinion from the safety lens. Today's session, I'm going to be sharing my opinion from the safety lens, and this is going to be the outline of my presentation. I'll be talking about, we'll be sharing perspective of what have transpired over the past couple of days since the incident happened. Following the explosion, you can see there's been a lot of actions here and there. The emergency response services have been very active on the ground. The Ghana Police Service, the Ghana National Fire Service, NADMO have all been on the ground to embark on search and rescue. So we're going to be looking at that. We're also going to be looking at all the news items that made headline, certain actions that have been taken by the Minister of Lands and Natural Resource. A lot of agencies involved have sent their sympathy with the people and all. So we'll just take our time and go through that. So that's under news review. Again, I'm going to be looking at the big question, and the big question is that, is this incident a case of an institutional failure? All right, we try to answer that by looking at the reference standard for managing explosives. We look at the role of the enforcement authority, the role of the duty holder, and the role of the employee, all right, to understand the context in which they all operate and why we have the incident we've had, this past days. Again, we'll be looking at the way forward. All right, regarding the way forward, we'll be looking at best practices across certain industries, and then also, most importantly, the importance of learning from incidents. All right, so before I dive into this presentation, I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Salom Amitewe. I'm a OHS, or occupational health and safety professional. I've been practicing for the past 10 years in the oil and gas industry. I'm currently a consultant into private practice, and I own a couple of businesses. I'm the founder of Shexel, the dedicated platform where we develop spreadsheet solutions, health and safety best practices to support safety professionals and small businesses to effectively manage safety at their workplaces, and to also boost their job performance or safety performance as well for the organization. So this is where you would find all the good stuff if you want to effectively improve your safety performance. You can see that we have a lot of reviews from safety professionals around the world. Currently have about 119 reviews. Again, Shexel is a global brand, so we are on Etsy. So that's Shexel right there on Etsy. Etsy is a global marketplace for a lot of handmade products and digital products. Again, we are quite big on Eloquence, which is a platform for best practices. So we are right here. We can see we have 44,000 views, 1.4 thousand users, 140 reviews, and 60 templates. I'm also the founder of HSC Market Ghana, a dedicated marketplace for health and safety products. All right, so we are looking to onboard vendors for various health and safety products under various categories like personal protective equipment, industrial equipment, traffic equipment, office fixtures, safety barriers, and various other services or products. So basically, we are trying to create value for buyers who currently find it very difficult to get vendors. We are bringing all vendors together so that we are able to create value for buyers. All right, again, I'm the founder of HSC Retail Shop. All right, it's an HSC marketplace for safety digital download. So this is where we sell training resources, and these are very, very good training resources, very complete package that includes, every package includes a presentation slide, a training evaluation form, attendance sheets, quizzes, questions and answers that would help you to effectively deliver an in-house safety training. So we have over 100 resources to support safety professionals, and a few of them are for free. So if you want to download free, training resources, you can do that right here. And then most importantly, I'm the founder of Check PGH Online, so the platform where this is a platform I'm going to be making all the reference to all the various incidents. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it. So as the incident occurred, we've published them on the platform as per news coming from other websites. So we have them, all of them, in the public safety category. So when you click on it, you'll find all of them in there. So to begin with, I'll quickly do a news review, and so that we can get a bit of context to all the actions that have been taken since the incident occurred. All right, so on the 20th of January, there was a road traffic crash involving a truck transporting explosive to a mining firm. The crash resulted in a fire incident, and the fire, which started, further escalated into an explosion. Now, you could realize that there were other escalating effects that could have been prevented. Those escalation effects could not be stopped, and it resulted in an explosion. The truck driver could not extinguish the fire because he actually had a panic reaction following the fire, and they went the other way to rather ward off people from getting closer to the incident. Now, the fact is that people who were involved could not extinguish the fire, and I think that that is a failure there, because, and that would be put on the duty holder. The duty holder could have ensured that there were people among the escort who could extinguish fire, especially when fire is at its incipient phase, because fire always starts at some point at an incipient phase until it begins to grow and finally matures to become uncontrollable. All right, so there was a failure, and this failure is on the part of the duty holder. Now, the action of the driver and other escorts, if indeed there was, could be acceptable in the sense that if they had not ward of people, gone to the school close by to actually warn the teachers and students to take a safe refuge, there would have been multiple fatalities. All right, so that is quite okay, but a duty holder could have done better. Now, following the accident, of course, the government came in to assure rapid return to normalcy, for the citizen. There was a statement by the president which is actually in order to demonstrate commitment following such an incident. Government is actually providing support, promising the support for the people. Now, police started giving accounts of the incident, and they gave details of the fact that the incident involved certain trucks, and it was a Maxim company that was involved transporting, explosive to Chirano mines, and had a crash with a motorcycle. Again, following the explosion, we also came to realize that a lot of houses have been devastated. There are about 500 houses that were affected, and this is quite expected because whenever there is an explosion, there is an outburst of pressure wave. This pressure wave can actually extend to about 200 meters away from the location of the incident. So the pressure wave ended up collapsing all houses nearby, and about 500 houses actually were all gone. All right, and then again, following that, we started getting a lot of stakeholders sending in their commiserations and all of that, sending their sympathies and condolences to those who have lost loved ones. Government also promised to rebuild the houses to demonstrate commitment for that. Again, alternative route as an immediate action was created, which in my opinion is very good, a very good response from the government, to create an alternative route to keep traffic moving. Explosive truck in Bogoso had no escort, so this brought a bit of controversy because this came from NADMO, and that was later clarified by the police that there was an escort, and the escort actually was sanctioned by the Ghana police for that exercise. All right, so the exploded truck was heading to our site. So the client, which was the Chirano gold mine, confirmed that the explosives were coming to their site, and the contractor was Maxam. And this also brings to question the role of the client in this whole incident. The client is supposed to exert control throughout the supply chain. So that is the supply chain control over the operations to ensure that safety is maintained at all stages of execution of the job. All right, so control of work from the client side is something that is a bit questionable. However, because ideally they're supposed to do more due diligence, keep Maxim on check, continue to engage them, continue to audit them, assess their performance and ensure that at all costs always they're maintaining high standard of safety performance. So you cannot only hold the contractor accountable and leave out the client. All right, that's just my opinion. Now the government launched a full-scale investigation, which is good to see, and actually the news made headline on CNN as well. So it got viral into the international community, and we had CNN showing interest in there. So that's the Minister of Information giving an account of what happened and the actions the government is taking in that effect. Again, the government donated 13 tons of relief items, which are very, very handy because that happened on the second day. It was very critical for the survival of the people. So that is a very good intervention there. And the sad news of a 7-month-old who was part of the people deceased, and that is rather unfortunate. You can see how sad this incident is. Again, we have a lot of stakeholders who were commiserating with the victims of the explosion, and then actions also from the lands minister and together with the government, to support the people there. Again, some people had to be airlifted as part of emergency report. So actually kudos to all the emergency services, the Ghana National Fire Service, the Ghana Police Service, NADMO. Everybody did quite well in the search and rescue, and that was good to see. Now the truck driver, according to headline, was of good help. So to a layman person, of course, the truck driver helped to some extent to prevent multiple fatalities. However, from the safety standpoint, a lot more could have been done by the duty holder to ensure that the driver was trained to extinguish fire whenever fire started, and if fire extinguisher was available, the driver should have been able to use that. If not, then another person could have been available to do that kind of exercise. Support from other stakeholders also came in, interdicting the chief inspector of mine. So the chief inspector of mine was interdicted, and the reaction was that is a knee-jerk reaction from the lands minister, and I tend to agree with that because it's too premature to actually do blame game at this point. You want to gather the facts and not to identify people and give an impression of a blame game culture. And then again, chief inspector of the mine, of course, has been interdicted. So that's it, guys. So this is just a brief newspaper review or a news review about the incident. Now the latest info is that the truck driver, motorcyclist, police escort are all alive, so I believe they're all going to aid in the investigation. All right, so let's take this as the newspaper review. I believe the information is out there for you to consume, so just check it out, and meet you guys soon. I'll be back. Let's take a break and I'll be back shortly. Cheers, guys. All right, so just before I could post this, there's been a new update which is very important to share. So subsequent to the last update, the tricycle rider denies colliding with the explosive truck. So this is quite interesting as it affects the storyline. We need to now find out what exactly caused the explosion, or we need to further probe into that to find if that is indeed true. Again, the motor rider narrates his version of the story, that he was rather hit by another vehicle. He was nowhere closer to the explosion scene or the accident scene involving the explosion or the explosive truck, and that is quite interesting. Again, we should make every effort to prevent unfortunate. So that's from the Chamber of Mine. And also the fact that Maxam, the subcontractor that was contracted by Maxam, has equally been suspended. So that's Joyce Deck Logistics. So that then makes it very clear that the transportation was not done by Maxam, but it was done by a subcontractor. This does not diffuse the importance of supply chain control right from the client, which is Chirano Mines, down to the contractor, which is Maxam, further down to the subcontractor. So supply chain control is always important. Again, Chirano Gold Mine has donated 25,000 key of relief items to support the people. And latest news is that 954 persons were affected by the explosion. 155 persons have sustained various degrees of injury. 14 persons have died. So the death count has increased by 1. And the fact that all these people, majority of them have been rendered homeless. So that is it, guys. Let's take this as the news review, and I'll be back shortly. Let's go for a break. Thank you. All right, so I'm back again. Now we're going to be looking at whether this incident is a case of an institutional failure. But before I get into that, I would like to get into the regulation. Apparently, there is a minerals and mining regulation 2012 LI 2177, which is very specific to management of explosives for such an activity. But before we get into that, I'll quickly want to give a snapshot of what a legal framework is. All right. So this is a presentation I put together a while back. So let me quickly snap into the exact part that has to do with the legal framework that we are looking at. All right. Now, it is a requirement according to the ILO that member states must have national laws and regulations. As far as health and safety is concerned, they must have an enforcement authority, body or authorities or body, mechanism for ensuring compliance, including system of inspection, arrangement for promoting safety at all levels, and national tripartite advisory body, information and service and information advisory service, occupational health and safety training, because that is very critical for ensuring proper safety behavior, occupational health services, research on occupational health and safety, mechanism for data collection, analysis on occupational injuries and disease, and insurance scheme for occupational injuries and diseases, support mechanisms for micro and small medium enterprises. Now that is the requirement of the ILO Convention 1 C187. All right. And then when it comes to best practice, there is a drive towards a single basic legal framework, which is mainly about the fact that there has to be a single chain of command as far as health and safety is concerned through a single framework. All right, so that it means there is the ministry, there is the enforcement authority, and that comes down to an act, then regulation, approved code of practice, guidelines, system of inspection, and penal action. So there's a single basic legal framework. And when you're looking at standard always entails all of this. Standard is not only about an act or only about regulation, but standard must always be developed, and that would include approved code of practice, guidelines, system of inspection, or basically approved code of practice and guideline. All right. So that said, we'll quickly go back to the regulation so that we have a look. That is the Mining Act. All right. So that is the Mining Act here, and this is a very comprehensive document. As you can see, 124 pages. So it's a 124-page document, and it pretty much covers everything that is critical and essential for management of explosives. So there is the chief inspector of explosives and inspectors of explosives. So the chief inspector works with a team of inspectors, and their powers and duties are clearly outlined. There's a requirement for reporting accident and incident. The power of the chief inspector has been clearly elaborated in there. There is the management of explosives, contravention of the regulation, the kind of actions that are required, explosive operating permit requirements. So before you can operate or manage or deal in explosives, you should have an operating permit or operating license, which would require having an operating plan. All right, and the content of the operating plan: explosives operating plan or explosive management plan. There's a content, there's a requirement for it. Again, there is need for code of safe work practice. There has to be a security plan that informs how you manage security as you transport explosive, because as you know, explosive poses a security threat. And similar to, like what happened at Bogoso explosion, it could have been somebody deliberately causing the explosion. So there's always a security threat when it comes to explosives. And again, emergency response plan, that is also a requirement where such incident should have been foreseen, or that incident is a foreseeable emergency that should have been planned for. Again, at all levels, from the top event being the fire incident, and the fact that there were escalating factors that could result in much more high potential consequence. So then you are able to develop barriers that prevent, barriers that react accordingly when those top events happen. And again, there's a requirement on annual inspections, which would mean that regular inspection from the enforcement authority will result in certification, licenses and permits, and renewal purposes. Certificate of competence of employees, and again, the business must have a license and permit, and register of all these permits, records to be kept by the chief inspector, and all of that. Okay, and it goes on and on, but I would like to focus more on the explosive, the permit to transport explosive. So that is in regulation 33. So we quickly jump into regulation 33, that clearly identifies the requirement for transport of explosives. All right, so hold on, that's there, right there where you are. Permit to transport. Now, a person who holds an operating license may apply for a permit set out in Form P in the second schedule to transport a specific type and amount of explosives. So that is it right there. Before you can actually transport an explosive, you should have had an operating license first, and again, you should seek a permit for such an activity. Right now, section 2 of regulation 33 also says a person who transports explosives under Form P permit shall give notice to the chief inspector of the type and amount of explosive to transported at least 48 hours before the explosives are transported. So it means that you need to keep the enforcement authority in the known 48 hours ahead for them to equally scrutinize and plan adequately how they're going to ensure they check the activity that you're carrying out. All right, so that is clearly the requirement that is there for transport, basically. So that is all we have in terms of transportation. It doesn't give a lot more details in terms of hazard communication, in terms of even police escort. So let me check quickly on police escort. That's control F, escort. Let's see if there's any keyword in there for escort. All right, so there is an escort requirement, and that is actually in regulation 107, vehicle to be accompanied by a competent person and police escort. A person who transports explosives in a road vehicle shall ensure that the explosives are under the direct control of a person who has a certificate of competence in explosives in accordance with the regulation 5. All right, a person who transports explosives shall in a road vehicle shall ensure that explosives are under the direct control of a person who has certificates of competence. So the transport company must have certificates of competence to do that. Without limiting the regulation, a person who transports explosives in a road vehicle shall ensure that the transportation is done under the police escort. So police escort is also important, and I guess that's where it ends. All right, so there's no further requirement as far as police concern is concerned. Again, let's look at emergency response. So regarding emergency response, the key word here is under regulation 110, procedure for vehicle involved in emergency response. That is right there. Where a vehicle transporting explosive is involved in an accident, the person transporting the explosive shall ensure that the explosives are examined by a person who is competent, and where the explosives have been damaged, the spill or competent person implement measures determined in the emergency response plan. Arrangements are to be made to keep the explosive under guard at all times. And where the competent person accompanying the explosive vehicle is not available, the police guards the explosives and the second competent person is sent to the scene. Over here is where the vehicle cannot continue the journey, the competent person arranges for an authorized vehicle to transport the explosives to the destination. And finally, the competent person within 24 hours reports the incident to the nearest inspector. So in terms of actions to take during an emergency is not really clear. It's simply the fact that you have to have an emergency response plan, and again you need to notify the authority, whenever there is any incidents. All right, so basically that's it, guys. And to what extent can we justify that the law is adequate? That is why I already mentioned that sometimes the law is not just adequate. We also need other support, systems. For instance, there's an act. So I presume that the regulation emanated from an act. The act is actually the Minerals Commission Act. The Mineral Commission Act, the act that actually established the Minerals Commission, and based on that act, you could have all the other allies coming from that act. So the ally would then be the mining and the minerals and mine explosive regulation. All right. However, this should always be the standard reference. There has to be an act, there has to be a regulation, there has to be an approved code of practice. Approved code of practice actually explains into details the requirements of the regulation and any other item that the regulation did not really capture. Proof code of practice can further explain it and even include it in there. And then again, the guidelines also do further explanation on the regulation. All right, the only difference between the regulation and approved code of practice is that regulation can actually hold you liable legally to be sued on that for any negligence. Approved code of practice, you need to demonstrate how you comply with the code of practice in a different way to achieve the intended results. All right, so basically that's what the standard is all about. Now, as you can see, there's not much when it comes to the regulation in terms of transport. It only says there has to be an escort, and basically the fact that you need to notify the chief inspector of explosives about the fact that you want to carry out an exercise and you need to be granted a permit specifically for that. So that's all we can really say about the requirements of the law as far as the transportation is concerned. So just take note, key things is that notification of the chief inspector of explosives 48 hours ahead. You have to get a permit specifically for such an exercise. And then again, in terms of emergency response, you would literally need to report when an accident happens. And again, if there is the fact that if you are transporting, you need to have a police escort. So that's it, guys. That is all we have in there. However, let's look at an approved code of practice. All right, so this is the Australian code for transport of explosives by road. All right, so take note, this is a code. This is a code of practice. Basically, it's not a regulation. This is further explaining the regulation, which is always important. All right, so this has a lot of interesting stuff. I've taken time to go through it, and this actually also looks very concise. In fact, there are, it classifies explosives under a certain threshold. That's the interesting thing about this regulation, such that when you have a particular quantity within a given threshold, risk categories, all right, risk could be categorized into three categories. So there is high risk, medium risk, low risk, depending on the threshold. And then again, in terms of transportation, there's always a need for markings on the truck being transported, on the load. So marking of the road vehicle for transporting explosives, that is very, very key. Again, there should be a requirement for escorts. I should think that. So let me quickly check escorts. These are the keywords that I use quickly to glance through. Exactly. So requirement for person loading, unloading, transfer explosives, person working or riding a vehicle. A person must not ride a road vehicle conveying high risk, high security risk. So, like I did mention, they have been able to categorize their risk levels, depending on thresholds. So there's a high security risk level. We're gonna be looking at that. Let's go to risk categories and what entails. But okay, before that, let's quickly exhaust this part. A person must not ride convey a high risk load of explosive unless the person has been cleared, has a security clearance, basically, where the where the monitoring requirements are met by the provision of the escort vehicle, then the requirement also applies to the driver. Anyway, there is an extensive requirement on escort. All right, now let's look at the risk categories. So that is something that I have observed, that it is a bit of a lag in our regulation, in the sense that we've not taken time to classify risk levels based on the quantities that we manage. So, risk should be classified based on a given threshold, beyond which the risk level escalates. It becomes level 2, level 3, and all, and a much more stricter control can then be enforced. All right, so in terms of risk level, let's quickly look at it. All right, risk level where you are. All right, so risk has been categorized into category 1, category 2, category 3, low risk, medium risk, high risk. All right, and the thresholds are all here. Thresholds, for various explosives and all. So that is quite interesting to see. So apart from the standard practice of markings on the product, markings on the vehicle being transported, that's a placard in front, at the back, on the side, left and right. That's always important. And then again, let's look at emergency response. What is required during emergency? All right. All right, so emergency, in terms of emergency, all right, the vehicle must have an emergency information panel that contains emergency information, and then again, emergency services, and all of that. Let's keep going. Placard is always important. Emergency information panel must be fixed to, or printed on, or placed in the frame that is fixed to the transport unit. So it has been in the car always. And then emergency response, let's look at it. Emergency panel, emergency information panel. Okay, requirement for emergency information panel. Okay, that's okay there. Particulars of to be displayed on a panel. Panel of display of information, emergency information panel. Method of attachment of emergency information panel. So basically, it's just about the fact that you have emergency contact details in the vehicle that should make it easy for you to contact emergency services if there's an accident. Now let's look at the requirement for fire protection. All right, fire protection. Maintenance of fire protection system and equipment, portable fire extinguishers, general requirements, portable fire extinguishers classification and rating. So, I mean, the requirement for fire extinguisher is also key, given the fact that potentially there can be ignition sources and all of that. So, guys, there you have it. We've looked at the regulations. We've seen what is in ours as against what is in an Australian regulation. I think that the minerals LI is actually equally extensive and comprehensive. The only shortfall is the fact that it does not classify risk level based on threshold. Because of that, you cannot really know which level at which you would have to exert much more stricter control, and that is rather unfortunate, because as per best practice, organizations would have to keep a chemical register, and again, within a certain threshold they need to notify enforcement authority in terms of using what you call a manifest and all of that. When it comes to transportation, it's equally important that within that threshold that can be classified as a high risk security load, it is always important a much more stricter control is exercised. So guys, that's it for the regulation. So now we're going to be finding out that did the enforcement authority do its work, or we're going to find out, did the regulation actually fail to protect the citizens? All right, did the regulation fail to protect the citizens? That's a question that we need to find out. The regulation is perhaps not adequate and must be reviewed, so there's need for a bit of reform. Whenever an incident of this magnitude occurs, there definitely has to be reforms, and it is important that we review the regulation. Now, another reason why the regulation must be reviewed is the fact that it does not make any mention of ALAP, and ALAP is simply as low as reasonably practicable, which is a keyword for ensuring that duty holders actually, go beyond prescriptive requirements to ensure that they carry out risk assessments of the operations and reduce risk to a level that is as low as reasonably practicable. So as part of the review, it is key that requirement for as low as reasonably practicable is integrated into the legislation. So it has to be in the regulations so that everybody would understand that it's not just about following the prescriptive requirements of the law verbatim or verbatim, but really understanding the principle of the law and ensuring that you go extra mile to implement controls that will ensure that the risk level is always reduced to a level that is as low as reasonably practicable. So that is the principle of ALAP. The enforcement authorities' role, obviously, they shared a bit of responsibility there, and we are waiting for findings from the investigation to prove that, in the sense that, was the question that we want to find out is that, was the mining inspector notified ahead of time? Did he issue a permit to cover the vehicle? All right, that is something we want to find out. Did they issue a permit to cover the transportation of that very exercise? Now, in terms of the duty holder, the duty holder is very responsible for ensuring that they comply with the remit of the law. Again, they are not only supposed to comply with the law, they are also supposed to ensure that they comply with the principle of ALAP, and that clearly means they need to adapt their safety management system, they need to adapt their safety controls to best practice. All right, because when you're complying with the principle of ALAP, you're always looking at current knowledge. You have no excuse to be negligent based on inadequate information. It is always important that you are doing your research, you are adapting yourself to international best practice, you are following best practice. All right, so the duty holder should have ensured that there is an effective and adequate risk assessment. They should have foreseen the potential of fire occurring, and given the fact that they were carrying explosives, they should have also foreseen the potential for explosion and ensure that the right barriers were in place. So usually with this arrangement, there are various risk assessment methodologies that are used. Sometimes they use barrier management. All right, barrier management always gives you the various hazards, the various escalating factors that can potentially result in the top event occurring, and the fact that if you don't react quickly, there are also going to be escalating factors that's going to further compound the top event to something with a higher potential consequence. So in that regard, you're always implementing barriers. These are proactive barriers that prevent these hazards from being realized, and then reactive barriers that always mitigate the consequence of the top event so that it does not escalate. Now in the case of the fire incident, it quickly escalated to an explosion, though there was a time frame. So the duty holder is really responsible, and we need to make sure that they are actually setting up as far as health and safety is concerned. Now with regards to and let's also remember that the duty holder is responsible for equipping the employee with health and safety knowledge, health and safety competence, making sure they are aware, making sure they know their roles and responsibility. So if the driver and any other person involved in the escort did not fight the fire but rather went the other way, then of course we need to hold the duty holder accountable, not the driver, because the driver actually was fleeing for his life because he wanted to save his life and save others. But the duty holder should have made provision for a firefighter, made provision for an emergency response team to be part of the team, because it's a serious business. It's just like working offshore. You're always making sure your emergency response team are always ready to fight any fire incident. Now, we couldn't just rely emergency response to just two people, or a driver and an escort, when there's a significant risk of explosion because you are dealing in explosives. All right, so that's just by the way for the duty of care. Now in terms of the employee, it's always important that you let them go through training, you let them make sure they are aware of their roles and responsibility, and they have the capacity to do that. So that is just by the way in terms of what the failures are. The failures came from the regulation, because the regulation is not adequate. It does not adapt the principle of ALAP. It does not clearly define the various risk categories based on threshold, and a few other stuff which I've already mentioned. And the competent authority, we need to probe further. The duty holder, I've already highlighted that, and then employees as well. So now I'm going to be going to quickly look at what we need to do as part of way forward. So before I do that, I'll go for a commercial break. Let's take a break right now and come back again. All right, so cheers guys, meet you guys again. Hello guys, so I'm back again. So let's quickly wrap up. The way forward is very simple. We're going to be looking at learning from incidents. This is something that is very important, and I'm going to be using this slide. All right, so it is always important that we learn from other industries. The oil and gas industry has actually gone through a lot of phases, a lot of major accident hazards that have happened over the time frame. The very key ones you may be aware is the Piper Alpha incident, and then again we have the Deepwater Horizon. All right, now these major events actually shaped the oil and gas industry, and of course most of these events had multiple fatalities. People died. For instance, Piper Alpha had 167 people died. Deepwater Horizon had not really deaths, but okay, 11 people died. 4.9 million barrels of oil was spilled. All right, so that's I think this is the Piper Alpha incident. Now that's Deepwater Horizon, the Macondo well, the Mokondo incident. All right. So what the industry has learned over the years is the barrier management philosophy. The barrier management philosophy, and that's what I mentioned earlier on, that you always want to ensure that the top event that has the potential to escalate is well controlled. So we are always looking at the threats. All right. Now this barrier. This is actually a bow tie risk assessment. All right. The bow tie risk assessment identifies the various threats, the various preventive barriers that you need to put in place against those escalating factors to prevent the top event. And then once you're able to control the top event, obviously you are good. But if you're not able to control the top event, then you want to also look at the reactive barriers that can help to minimize the escalating factors that would result in a major accident or a high potential consequence. All right. So there's a bow tie risk assessment related to road transport, or basically driving a car. All right. So for instance, as a slippery road condition is a hazard, intoxicated driver is a hazard, blowout is a hazard, offensive driver is a hazard. Offensive driver could have probably be the tricycle. It's a hazard. All right. What do you do? Maybe escort is a preventive barrier. Adequate escort is a preventive barrier. The speed limit that you need to regulate is a preventive barrier. The fact that you are driving defensively is also a proactive barrier. So we're talking about proactive barriers, and you're able to minimize any form of chain of events leading to a perfect storm that will then result to a fire incident. All right. Now, unfortunately, the fact that the fire occurred means that all the barriers had failed. All right. And then if the barrier had failed, what do? You activate reactive barriers. So that could have been fire extinguisher, quickly extinguishing the fire, based on the fact that somebody is competent to do that, based on the fact that you've done your risk assessment to actually identify this as something that is about to happen. All right. So reactive barriers are always very, very key in mitigating the consequence of major accident hazards. Okay, so that's just by the way for you guys. There's something that we've learned in the oil and gas industry, and it's always all about barriers. So we call it the barrier management philosophy. So that's just about it. So that's just learning from other industries. So again, we are also looking at having a single basic legal framework, that's the OHS, a single basic legal framework that will begin with an act. Now let me quickly do a recap of how the current legal framework is. You can see the current legal framework. We have Ministry of Labor Employment Relation dealing with labor department, National Labor Commission, Factories Inspectorate Department. We have the Ministry of Interior dealing with Ghana National Fire Service, Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation dealing with EPA and Land Use and Special Planning Authority. We also have Ministry of Energy and Petroleum dealing with Petroleum Commission and the MPA, Minerals and Lands, Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources dealing with Minerals Commission. And then we have the Ministry of Works and Housing dealing with District Assemblies, Town and Country Planning, Building Inspectors, and the Ministry of Road and Highways dealing with Ghana Highways Authority. So you can see that even we have the Road Transport, Ministry of Road and Transport dealing with road transport, and then again another enforcement authority which is the Maritime, and they all have other agencies they're dealing with. That is how scattered our legal framework is, which does not augur well. So it's like you're just health and safety, you rather distribute it across various agencies who may not have the capacity to effectively enforce health and safety laws. That is why in most jurisdictions there's just one particular department. For example, in the case of the US, there is the Department of Labor, that's the ministry, and then there is OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and then they have their act, Occupational Health and Safety Act 1970, and they have specific regulations. All right, that they have and other approved code of practices and everything. In the case of the UK, the same thing. They have the Department of, I think, Works or something. All right, the ministry is a Ministry of Works or something, and then they have Health and Safety Executive, and then they have the Health and Safety at Work Act, and they have various health and safety regulations addressing various health and safety concerns. So it becomes very easy to quickly create new laws, and all are taking premise from the act. And then they have approved code of practice guidelines, and they have a lot of inspectors who are well resourced, and they're able to go around and check, issue citations and penal actions. All right, so that is what we need as a country, and it is very dependent on the OHS bill. The OHS bill that is currently sitting in Parliament is very essential. It has to be passed ASAP to quickly establish an enforcement authority and find a way of consolidating all the scattered laws in various ministries and the various ministries and bring them together over here, and then based on research how we can help people to understand the regulation, we come up with a approved code of practice and guidelines in the future. So that is the way forward as far as the regulation or the legal framework is concerned. Now, we don't want to always be like this. I mean, this is totally unnecessary. For instance, fire safety concerns is fire service and it goes like this. You're trying to comply with fire precaution regulation here. Environmental concern is EPA like this. Development permit is just like this. Labor issues, it goes like that. Then suddenly we are talking about industries also, petroleum commission going like this. Downstream MPA may not even have their own health and safety laws and all of that. Mining industry goes like that. Construction literally have nothing, and it goes on like that. This does not augur well, and we hope that the Parliament of Ghana will understand the importance of passing the OHS bill, because it actually creates a lot of jobs. All right, it creates a lot of jobs because there will be a whole ministry, a lot of inspectors, and a lot of companies that are currently negligent on safety will begin to take safety serious and have a safety department, employ safety officers. So the economic gains is very huge. All right, economic gains are huge. So we just entreat on the government of the Republic of Ghana to ensure that the bill is passed into law. So this brings to an end this insightful presentation. I believe that we learned something new. It was very insightful. It was engaging. So if you are happy with the content and you would want to promote us quickly, subscribe to our channel and be part of the family. All right, check PGH Online. We are here to stay. We want to provide media influence to health and safety in Ghana by engaging with safety professionals who would continuously share content, share their opinions from the safety lens on national issues. Thank you all for your attention and have a great day. Bye for now.